Hi, Vinnie. Thanks for having me. Rob Zwiebach here, lead product management for Workday Financials, and I'm really happy to spend 20 minutes or so with you talking through some of what makes Workday Financials unique and where we're going.
Rob, thank you for taking the time. Workday Financials, one of the more exciting areas for the company, right? You guys have been gaining quite a bit of traction. So I don't know how you're going to do it in 20 minutes, but
We'll
you
see.
can.
I'll do the best I can. All right. So I will just mention very briefly, safe harbor applies. I'm going to be sharing with you some of our future direction. And so this is obviously our intention. Our best laid plans do sometimes have to change. But we are talking here.
That is the quickest and funniest safe harbor voiceover I've heard.
Well,
Congratulations.
I'm tired of spending a lot of time on it. So, I think you and I both understand what we're talking about, right? So, when I am talking about Workday Financials, we are talking about the overall solutions for the office of the CFO. And it's a very broad set of capabilities, and it's really everything that a medium to large organization needs to manage its financials across record to report, procure to pay, quote to cash, really the full set of financial processes. And when we talk about Workday's approach, we always want to ground it in terms of the visual that you see here, where Workday's solutions are all built on a common platform, harnessing what we call the intelligent data core. And the intelligent data core is a very fundamental differentiator for Workday. It is really a different approach to managing financial information, and it's built on a common set of platform capabilities, including common security model, common privacy model, and with artificial intelligence built right into the platform. And that's really key. That's an area where, of course, you're hearing about artificial intelligence all the time. Everybody's talking about it. Workday's approach is unique. It is very much built into the platform. It's not just some kind of add-on, bolt-on kind of capability. And it's really transforming the way our customers are able to automate processes and drive efficiencies. And when I talk about the intelligent data core, again, it is a key differentiator for us. And this visual highlights how it's different. So on the left, what you see is the idea of a fixed accounting key, which is really kind of the basis for traditional financial management systems, where very early on, when you're putting a financial management system in place, you define the fixed accounting key, and that's how you're going to be recording all of your financial activity. That's going to drive all of your accounting. That's going to drive all of your financial reporting. And so organizations have to be very careful about how they define their fixed accounting key. They want to be able to capture certain dimensionality so that they can do reporting, but they don't want to capture too much dimensionality because that creates overhead. And that makes data entry more difficult. And so there's trade-offs. Organizations have to make trade-offs. On the one hand, they want to be able to capture rich dimensionality for reporting and analysis. On the other hand, they want to keep things nice and simple and clean to avoid overhead. And so that really forces organizations to make a lot of trade-offs. And Workday has taken a different approach. Workday basically said early on, when we were first developing our financial system, we said, we don't want to force these trade-offs. And so we're going to not have this concept of a fixed accounting key. We just don't have it. And so what we do instead is we capture the dimensionality that's relevant to the specific financial accounting entry, the specific transaction that's happening. And we don't worry about having this fixed code block that applies in all cases. And so what that means is that if we're capturing something like a revenue, it may make sense to also capture the line of business, the region, the industry. Whereas when we're capturing something like an asset acquisition, some of those things don't make sense. And so we don't bother with them. We don't have this fixed accounting key where users always have to enter these codes with a certain number of characters. Instead, we just focus on capturing what dimensionality is relevant and contextual based on what the user is doing.
Rob, I'm going to carbon date myself, but I remember a conversation when Workday must have been a year or 2 year old. Mark Nittler and I had a conversation on this. So it's great to see how far you've come.
Yeah, I mean, we've really stuck. As you mentioned, I think Mark Nittler and others kind of figured out some of this concept very early on, and um, it really is. It's a different approach, right? It's a different way of doing things, and it's deriving significant benefits for our customers. And we'll get into some more of that right here, right? So this again kind of takes this concept forward a little bit, and what it highlights is that on the left, again, with more of the traditional approach with based on that fixed accounting key, you've got a lot of data being copied and replicated through the system as transactions move through a life cycle. And so, for example, as you move from in the procure to pay space, for example, as you move from a requisition through a purchase order, through an invoice, that's ultimately converted into journal entries, posted into the ledger so that it's represented on financial statements. At each of those stages, you've got data being written into some tables in a database. And at each of these arrows between stages, you've got some kind of batch programs that are reading data from those tables, doing some enrichment, maybe doing some summarization, maybe stripping out some detail, and writing that data into the next set of tables. And so what that means is you've got a lot of replication, a lot of data movement, a lot of summarization, stripping out details, a lot of points of failure, and a lot of batch processes that need to be orchestrated and scheduled. Workday, on the other hand, said we don't want to have all that overhead. We don't want to have all this batch processing. We're much more focused on real-time, in-memory processing. And because of the rich dimensional model, rather than that fixed accounting key, we're able to do things like drill down on a single click. So whereas with the traditional approach on the left, if you want to drill into the underlying detail, you need to really retrace your steps back down that life cycle through each of those arrows. With Workday, you don't have to do that. It's a single click. And what that means is I can drill, for example, on something like revenue by customer or by industry or by customer and industry. Whereas with the traditional approaches, there are going to be certain drill downs that you can do easily. You can probably drill by cost center. That's fine. But if you want to drill back to the original transaction, you're going to have to work your way back down that life cycle through all of those clicks. And if you want to drill on something like revenue by customer, you probably can't even do that because you don't have access to that level of detail. Whereas with Workday, we have that with a single click.
And this is straight in the general ledger, or you have to use Prism?
Oh, good question. So this is really straight in the core financials. And, as per the discussion that you had with Mark Nittler way back when, one of the points about the Workday approach is that we have a much closer linkage between the general ledger and the underlying transactions than you typically have seen. So we don't really have this notion of subledgers where you then have to kind of copy data, move data from the subledger into the general ledger. With Workday, it's really all very cohesive. And so this is in the core financials. You can think of it as being in the GL. And so, yeah, we're able to do things like drill by customer, drill by employee. Whereas in a traditional system, you'd never have that detail in your GL. With Workday, we're able to because it's a very cohesive architecture across the entire financials footprint. Now, you mentioned Prism, and it's worth highlighting the Prism capability as well because Prism is very powerful. So Prism is the ability for organizations to bring external transactions, external data into Workday for reporting and analysis. And when we look at financials, what we see is that typically about 80% of financial transactions originate outside your core financials in some kind of source transaction systems. Historically, what that meant is you need to have a very heavy, kind of cumbersome technical process to take that transaction data from those source systems and convert it into accounting entries that you can post in your GL. And that's shown here. So this is an example of a large hospital chain where on the left side of the screen, they have transactions originating in EMRs, in various healthcare industry specific systems. You've got this very heavy IT process in the middle to transform those transactions into debits and credits, into accounting entries that can post into a general ledger. And so it's a very technical process. You've got accounting logic that's embedded in code, which means that if you need to make any changes, that can be very difficult. It can be very cumbersome. And again, very technical. You need a lot of expertise. And so with Workday, we follow a different approach. We offer the Accounting Center, which is built on top of Prism, as you mentioned, which means that organizations can load those transactions from those source systems directly into Workday as they are. don't need to do any transformation, don't need to have any kind of technical process to do a lot of transformation, a lot of accounting logic written in code. Instead, you're just loading that transaction data directly into Workday as it is, so it's available for reporting and analytics, and you can then process it through the Workday accounting engine to post journal entries into the GL right alongside the original transactions that produce the journal entries. And so what that means is both A, you're able to automate your accounting process, you're able to have accounting own the accounting rules because the rules are not in code. They're just done through a simple browser interface that Workday customers already know from processing accounting for payroll and for supplier invoices and for expense reports. And perhaps more importantly, it's an incredibly rich source of information for analytics and reporting because you've got this very rich, detailed transaction data in Prism right alongside the journal entries that are summarized and produced from it to produce your financial statements. So it really provides an incredible source for insights and analytics.
Now, Rob, you're making me, I'm going to share something again from our past. I started my career at Pricewaterhouse, and I wanted to go into consulting right away. I had an MBA, and they said, no, you got to go through audit for a couple of years. And I hated it, absolutely hated it. But I got my CPA, and basically the philosophy was, it'll give you a chance to see processes and understand, the flow of transactions. And they were right. I wish they had made me do it for only 3 months rather than 3 years. but this is all coming back.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. It's an interesting thing. I mean, it's painful, but it's the kind of experience that you're probably happy to have had, not necessarily happy to be going through. So I can identify. So what I'm going to show now is I'm going to show a little bit of all of this in action. So we talked about the intelligent data core. We talked about the rich dimensional model instead of a fixed accounting key. We talked about accounting center. And so what this now produces is something like this, where I can start from a very summarized profit and loss report and drill by an incredibly rich set of dimensions, as you can see here. So in this example, it's a restaurant chain. And so you're able to drill on revenue by restaurant. Within each restaurant, you have all of this rich dimensionality that you can drill on, including journal source. Because remember, transactions are originating outside Workday in many cases in something like a point of sale system, as you can see here. And so that point of sale data comes in through Accounting Center, processed through our accounting engine, and now you have access to this incredible rich source of data in terms of like revenues broken out by chicken nuggets versus chicken sandwiches. So it's very specific to each individual customer, right? Obviously, a hospital chain is not going to be interested in chicken nuggets versus chicken sandwiches, but a restaurant chain is. And so it's highly, highly configurable, and you're able to have an incredible rich source of analysis driving everything from the high-level profit and loss report all the way through the very low-level individual restaurant profitability by individual menu item. Now, one of the key things that comes along with this rich source of data is, of course, machine learning. We talked about this a little bit at the beginning, that artificial intelligence and machine learning are built directly into the core, directly into the platform that underlies all of the Workday solutions. And so we're able to harness this rich data source with those platform machine learning capabilities to do some really rich capabilities. And so the example that I'm showing here is something that we call Journal Insights. Journal Insights is where we apply machine learning to the accounting process itself. We look at past patterns of similar transactions and we flag the journal entries that look like they are probably anomalous, that they are probably incorrect based on the other activity that the organization is doing. And so in this example here, you can see some very high-level views of where the system is flagging anomalies. You can drill into an individual set of journal lines that the system thinks are likely erroneous. So what the system is doing is it's basically streamlining the entire account reconciliation and period close process by providing guidance, pushing out to the user exactly where they should be looking in terms of what has probably gone wrong during the month, what they're going to need to be correcting. And it helps to automate that correction process by automatically reversing out the erroneous journal line and debiting or crediting the correct line. So as a result, it's still in the hands of the user, right? It's not just some kind of black box automation that's happening behind the scenes. Users still have full visibility into everything the system is recommending, and users ultimately decide whether what the system is saying is problematic, truly is problematic and needs to be corrected, or is just unusual, right? Sometimes things are unusual, but they're still correct. The human feedback loop is what helps the algorithm to learn and to get better over time. So as you use this capability, it's getting better and better, and the user input is less and less because the system is automating more and more of that period close process through account reconciliation. That's a capability that we delivered several years ago. We're continuing to enhance it. We have over 300 customers already using it. So we're very excited about it. And with machine learning, we're still very much learning as we go a little bit. And so we're very focused on taking what we learn from each individual use case and applying it in other areas. And so what I just showed you, Journal Insights, is, again, using machine learning to do anomaly detection on accounting entries. Great. We've already started to extend that in other areas. So what we're now doing, among other things, is something called Expense Protect, where we take that exact same anomaly detection that we've learned from Journal Insights and applying it to the expense audit process. Going back to your days as an auditor, maybe you know this will resonate with you, that instead of organizations just doing a kind of random audit of maybe 10 or 15% of expense reports, the system will now do an automated 100% audit of every expense report and just push out to the expense business partner those expense items that look like they're likely fraudulent or otherwise wrong.
You know, you just gave me another thought. One of the guests I had told me, he said, you know, Vinnie, we are seeing AI use cases, generative AI use cases that are still very SG&A oriented. And he goes, I wish the industry would move to more cost of goods sold, because then you get into operational data, vertical data, and so on. You know, you guys having access to the operational data, you should be thinking about maybe moving the use cases more towards COGS. That could be a huge, you know, that's not an accounting aid. It'll be much more strategic, right, from a management perspective. But anyway.
No, I think you're right. I think that's actually a really good point. And I think that is something we really need to start taking a harder look at. In some of our early machine learning efforts, as you mentioned, it does tend to be, you know, things like G&A focused a little bit, in part because that was those were perhaps more understandable problems, more low-hanging fruit for us to tackle. But again, as we were building up the muscle and as we're learning as we go, I think we definitely need to start targeting some of the more strategic use cases, as you mentioned. So I think that's very much on the nose. This is now an area that is under development. So what I've shown you so far has all been available. This is now where that safe harbor statement that I spent about 2 seconds on applies, because this is something that we're working on now. It's in development, not yet available, but targeted for late this year / early next year. And this is starting to leverage Gen AI to help automate and streamline the collections process. So starting from a collections dashboard where the system is pushing out to the collectors those customers who are most at risk of going delinquent, what it can then do is automatically generate a dunning letter for you. So we're leveraging a large language model here to generate the text of the dunning letter so that the collector doesn't have to spend time on that. You're able to do things like include the past due invoices, and so the system will automatically pull in that detail. So you've got your transaction detail to back up the text in the letter. And of course, once you review what the system has produced, you can tweak it. So you can see, you can make it longer or shorter. You can change the tone. Perhaps the tone is a little bit too, you know, in your face. This customer doesn't yet warrant that kind of treatment. So we're going to make the tone a little gentler. Maybe the next letter would become a little bit more urgent, more aggressive, but for now, it can be a little gentler. And so simply by tweaking these levers with, you know, in a matter of seconds, the user is able to see an updated letter. And so the savings in terms of effort and time should be very obvious, right? I mean, the response to this has been, as you can imagine, tremendous, because people see this as a huge savings in terms of, nobody really wants to be spending their time writing these letters. Nobody really wants to be spending their time, haggling over the individual words. And so by leveraging Gen AI to do a lot of that heavy lifting, it frees people up to spend their time doing much more value-added activities. And so again, it's an area where this is probably our first, this is our first foray into leveraging a large language model in financials. Workday is already leveraging these in other areas like generating job descriptions, and you can expect to see more of this going forward. And in addition to what we're doing with the large language model on the collection side, as you can imagine, we are seeing tremendous benefit to this type of natural language interface in the planning process. And so what you're seeing here is some of the planning and analytics that goes along with that through a natural language interface. And so the user is able to just enter a very common English sentence or question. The system responds with the appropriate analytics and graphs. You can drill in to see more detail, and here it's breaking out, the plan versus prediction on a product by product level. Based on what it's flagged for you, you may want to drill into further detail. And again, just by typing in a simple question, the system will produce graphs for you, push out to you the key insights and analytics that you need. And it's really optimized for collaboration, enabling you to very easily publish some subset of those graphs to a dashboard that can be shared. So the idea here is very much around really putting the power of analytics and reporting directly in the hands of the end user, not needing to go to IT to get a report authored or a query written, but really being able to automatically create things like a dashboard that can then be shared with multiple users, commented on, and really used to drive action going forward, as well as starting to leverage some of this natural language interface in things like scenario planning, where it has, I think, very obvious applicability. And so that's an area that you can expect to see significant deliveries from us in the coming 12 months. Now, going along with what we're doing in planning, I do want to highlight a little bit about consolidation, because this is an area where we're seeing significant market interest, the power of combining planning with consolidation. And Workday has offered a very robust consolidation process for some time. But one of the areas that we haven't invested in previously and are really starting to now is around being able to include external subsidiaries, external parts of the business in the consolidation process. So in other words, we've offered a rich consolidation process in the past for consolidating the Workday financial data. That's great. But many of our customers are now expanding overseas, expanding through acquisitions. And so we're very focused on ensuring they're able to automate the consolidation process, even including bringing in data from external subsidiaries, perhaps companies that they just acquired, and ensuring that we're able to comply with the different requirements of the different countries that our customers are operating across. We now have customers operating across over 130 countries. And so in many cases, we have a consolidation process that's pulling in data from up to that number of countries, right? And so that means a tremendous amount of currency translation we need to do, a tremendous amount of intercompany processing across the country boundaries, complex minority interest and other calculations. And so we're very focused on ensuring that our consolidation process is up to that task of being able to accommodate, everything, including the most complex consolidation requirements across hundreds of countries, thousands of subsidiaries, including very recent acquisitions and frequent ownership changes and complex structures.
Rob, I know Carl, one of his priorities is much more global expansion. So not here, but we should probably have you come back and talk about what you're doing about localization, right? It's just amazing how many new statutory reporting, e-invoicing, new taxes, new customs coming around the world, right? I mean, just a different world. So maybe you can come back and talk about localization.
Vinnie, I will take you up on that offer. You're absolutely right. It's an incredibly dynamic area. We're seeing, new changes all the time. And we're doing a lot to ensure our customers are able to comply with whatever requirements they face in whatever countries they operate in. You know, some of it's going to be industry specific based on what they're doing. So yeah, I think it's a really interesting topic. I'd love to come back and talk to you in more detail about it.
Great.
So that just about really kind of covers what I had wanted to share with you. Again, this is just a little bit of a summary, really, of some of the work we've already done around machine learning. As you can see, we've delivered quite a few capabilities. Customer adoption has been quite rapid, and we think it's only going to increase from here.
You know, the only thing I don't see here, well, there's many things I don't see here, but I don't see any asset oriented processes here. You know, because that's becoming a very, in a number of industrial sectors, that people are using them. This assets generate so much data now, right? IoT data, maintenance data, etc., that it affects, you know, clearly accounting depreciation is important, but the revenue side is being affected by assets quite a bit now. So
that is good input, and I think it's a fair point. You don't see that here. It's not an area that we have focused in. We have been focusing primarily really on service industries, but even there, we are seeing assets as, you know, a key business concept, key driver of value. And so I think you're right. I think that is an area that there's some real benefit to us and to our customers to start to focus on.
well, maybe you can come back and talk about that sometime.
I'll take you up on that opportunity as well. So I guess with that, I'll just say thank you, Vinnie, very much for the time. It's been great talking to you. I really appreciate it.
You know, you did it in 20 minutes. I can't believe you've summarized, what is it, 15 years of development and progress in 20 minutes? Fantastic.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.